So we're back, and to start off the day, we're going to be playing some ranked ladder games, and later we will be hosting the tournament for the for the ranked ladder. So that's going to be the plan. But for this video or Twitch stream, depending on how you're watching, we're going to be starting just with some ladder games up against Parallax. Nope, up against Spartan. Up against Spartan with the Bretonia Trebuchet build. Moving on up towards me, we'll see if we can take them out with our Great Cannon. We do have but a single Great Cannon, and I'm a bit worried that it won't really be enough to kill off the Trebuchets here. But we're going to be trying our best, since if we do manage to do that, our artillery will be able to do a lot of damage to these Questing Knights. So that shall be the goal. We'll also be moving up our Demogryph Knights to support Franz as the battle gets underway, and he can start cycle charging these Trebuchets. He's in a fairly safe position just because the cavalry is lagging behind a tiny bit, so he should actually be able to get some pretty decent damage. And there we go. We immediately rout off one Trebuchet model at the cost of a little bit of HP off of Franz. Does get chased down by Lewin too, and the poison is going to be affecting him, but I think he should be able to make it out just fine. In the meantime, our artillery is going to be firing away at the Bretonians, getting in a little bit of damage. And to start off, it looks like we're trading out fairly well. If we could take out this field Trebuchet too, that would be just absolutely dandy, as having that artillery advantage on such a wide map is definitely quite huge, and we want to be pulling that as strongly as we can. Still though, our cannons will actually have to hit to take out the artillery models, and at this distance, it's not the easiest task ever. Nevertheless, the cannons, I think, will still trade up here, but I'm a little bit worried. I'm even going to bring up the Hellblaster forwards just a little bit to try and use that to help against the Trebuchets. Feels a little bit wasteful since it brings the Hellblaster into a bit of an awkward position, but the benefits of doing this mean that we'll be able to secure the artillery fight, and from there hopefully win out the game. Now we've had let's see, some not great RNG on the cannon shots. It seems to be missing a lot of the field Trebuchet models, but on our side we also haven't taken too much damage either, so I'm pretty well content just sitting back and continue to play the artillery game, since I believe we should be winning it now that our Hellblaster is in range. Going to fire away at the field Trebuchet, and it should eventually take that down. As for these Bretonian peasants moving up towards us, we'll be using our cavalry to shield them away, and our outriders to protect our cavalry. Silver Bullets can move into position too, and with the first Trebuchet model down, feeling much better now. We can start focusing the other Trebuchet, and this infantry here is actually pretty overextended, so we'll be able to get some pretty nice routes there with the Demogryphs. The real threat here of these Questing Knights isn't too bad, since they are quite far away, and we'll even be able to focus them down with our artillery now. Be shooting at them with the Hellblasters, and that should take out a lot of models. In the meantime, our Demogryph Knights have routed off the Bretonian front line, and that will allow us to get our Sigmar Sons come in and support in this situation. They will be tanking the charge for our Demogryphs. That will allow a pretty nice counter charge to come in to win out this fight. Meanwhile, on our flanks, we have our infantry locking up the Bretonians, and now with Franz's buffs on all of our Demogryphs, we should be able to rout off all these Questing Knights absolutely no problem. Getting low on leadership, And as for our caster, we're going to put down some regrowths onto the Demogryph Knights just to really secure the victory in this cavalry fight. We have infantry too, spearmen specifically supporting, so I'm quite confident that we'll be able to win it. It looks like we do, with the Demogryphs taking very little damage, and Awakening of the Wood does go down, but it's actually pretty effective versus the Demogryphs. We're going to try healing that up, and then charging Lewin, since he's going to be one of the last major threats facing up against us. If we can take him out, Franz will be able to carry out the victory. So this should be the play that we need to actually win it off. Just charging straight into him and surrounding him with the Demogryphs. He shouldn't be able to escape, and even if he does, we have our range units here to fire him down. We'll move up a tiny bit just so that they have a better line of fire, and a little bit of repositioning of our spears should stop all the cavalry from engaging too hard on my forces. There we go. Lewin is now down. That is a nice advantage for us, and Franz can now pop over to the Bretonnian archers and rout them off. We'll heal up our Demogryphs since we definitely want them to be taking as little damage as possible. And then it's just closing out the game at this point. The loss of Lewin and all the elite knights of the Bretonnians was a little bit too much to bear. And it's going to be a mass rout. Archers are gone. We can bring in our Demogryphs up here too to finish chasing them off. And as for the questing knights, I'll peel off one unit of Demogryphs just to help out Franz in this battle. As for our range units, it looks like they've been protected fairly well. And we'll just be advancing with them and closing things out. But cool. What's going on in chat right now? People saying people are talking about new players. Are you talking about the ranked ladder? I think with Turin really shouting it out on his channel, it's brought in a lot of new blood, which is pretty exciting. Eventually, once there's enough people, they can even start matchmaking with ELO ranges to make sure that they play against other new players and that they don't always get stomped. Nope, talking about World Cup. All right, well, there you go. Yes. World Cup is pretty nice. I've played a few of my games, and I think all my bracket except for myself and one other guy are fairly fresh and new. Pretty exciting. But yeah, so taking a look at the results, essentially we won out via our artillery. Cannon specifically really mulched up some knights by the looks of it. They killed off the trebuchets, did generally pretty well. Hellblaster did die to the peasant bowmen, but that didn't matter too much. We just took some really nice melee engagements. Alright, so here we go. We are on to the second game. I forgot to update my score. We are one game up since we won with our game as the Empire, and we're up against Coast as the Skaven. I feel like Skaven are much stronger against Coast nowadays with their newly added wolf rats. So I'm feeling fairly confident here against them. And all we got to do is simply advance so our slingers can start shooting. And then we'll be good. Now there is a Gallows Giant Necrofex Colossus that we'll have to be a tiny bit wary about. But its range is fairly short. And in general, a lot of the Coast units here have pretty short range. So we can just sit back nice and comfortable with our slingers. And if any Mourngulls show up, we have our kill squad over here to assist. These gutter runners will be able to push away any deck droppers that come towards us. And with all these tools, I'm feeling pretty comfortable. Essentially, we'll just be sitting nice and far back away from these gunnery mobs and forcing the Coast to advance towards us. An Aranessa Salt Spite in the mix. We'll have to be a little bit wary of her that she doesn't net down and snipe Snickage. But with our concealment bombs, we can actually get the approach on her, and that should work out fairly well. So here we go, just getting in a ton of damage. We forced our opponent to advance with the zombies, but they likely won't really be able to make it to my front line. In fact, this coast build could have a very hard time against what I've brought today. And I'm not sure what they'll be able to really do to pressure me here. Gallows Giant will definitely be fairly scary though, as it will be able to fire in onto my troops and rout them off pretty quickly. So we're going to move up with our forces and begin sniping out the Gallows Giant. As for our gutter runners, we're going to move them up now to push back the deck droppers, and it's going to be a swift engagement onto the coast center line. We have our wolf rats who can dive right on in, getting in a good amount of damage. There's no AoE here other than the Gallows Giant, and you can see the wolf rats. They will really just demolish a lot of these troops. Morskatar's Hellion will go straight for the Gallows Giant. And the wolf rats, they're going to dive in onto the rats of the coast. Death Frenzy cast over here should get them to do a lot of damage now, and you guys will see in just a second how much these wolf rats do. They should be able to really mulch this fight, and with their immune to psychology, they won't be routing too easily. A Scorch on the Scurvy Dogs of the coast too should get them into crumbling. They should go down very soon. And now Snicketch can do what he does best, diving in onto Aranessa Salt Spike, hopefully killing her off. Morskatar's Hellion will deal with the Gallows Giant, and our Slingers will deal with all these deck droppers. Should turn out well. We are getting a mass rout on the Wolf Rats, but that's to be expected. Their leadership isn't that powerful, but lucky for us, they will be rallying fairly easily. Their movement speed is high enough too where the deck droppers can't easily chase them off. And with the snipe on Aranessa, we should be good to go. There's not a ton of Vampire Coast units left. And even though there is a lot of infantry, Snicket should actually be able to win that fight fairly well. So let's throw down some abilities that we can get to Aranessa. We'll throw down another AoE to clear out all the chaff. And then a second Death Frenzy here, just to buff up our troops and Snicketch, so that he can win out the day. Killed off all the deck droppers, and this tiny blob here going to be taking the full might of our mass slinger force. Poor old Aranessa too gets routed off, and we can probably just hunt her down with wolf rats. Absolutely no problem. There's a gunnery wight nearby, but you can't really kill too many wolf rat models for each shot that he throws down. So not especially threatening. The fleet captain too won't really be able to catch the rats. And yeah, we should be good. She might throw down a summon, which would save Aranessa, but our heroes are at such high HP. It should be army losses for the coast soon enough. And there we go. Army losses hits, the Mourngulls collapse, the caster throws down a final summon, but shall not be enough. We'll just simply walk up and kill him with the wolf rats. So there we go. Pretty nice, clean game. We actually took very few losses there. And I think just the build wasn't really sufficient to handle what we brought this time around. The wolf rats with some nice damage onto the coast infantry. There were a lot of zombies, but they couldn't really do much to catch up the slingers. And speaking of the slingers, Skaven Slave Slingers, one of the most cost-efficient troops in the game, almost paid for themselves ×3. As for everything else, it still did pretty well, and Snicketch is very important in against many other coast builds. So there we go. That's the first ranked win of today. So here we go. Practicing against Call Harmon's Lizardmen, as requested with our Vampire Coast. We have Luther Harkin in the air, going up against Aslan, Mage Priest of Fire. So there's no Tempest to really slow him down, but we can't be too aggressive here. because chameleon skinks are quite prevalent and will be pretty scary to actually fly into. It's a lot of unnecessary damage on Luther that we don't want to be taking. So here we go. The lizardmen are advancing. Chameleon skinks will be firing away onto some of my zombies, but that's not especially worrisome, just because the zombies are very tanky. They're not especially worried about a few javelins going into their face, so that should be fine. Now for these skink cohorts along the left flank, we're gonna hit them with the scurvy dogs in the back after using our zombies to tank into them. As for the Saurus, we'll be hitting them with bombs. And here we go, like I said, some kill boxes are nice and well set up. So we can gun down the cavalry as they try to sneak through. And these Saurus warriors will be able to gun them down too. Luther can now move in. He's looking for opportunities to kill off low leadership units, like this group over here, and then bouncing left onto this unit of skinks. As for these pterodon riders, as they dive in, we'll want to be a little bit careful, since they can actually shut down my guns fairly effectively. So killing off as many of them as possible is going to be one of our goals. Some rock drops will be going down. Hopefully we can prevent some of them, but it looks like they do manage to go off. And my front line has actually collapsed just a tiny bit, but the leadership for the lizardmen is waning. Our scurvy dogs have collapsed the left flank. Luther is holding this flank fairly well. And the pterodons have actually landed on the ground. This allows our sirens to go ahead and engage into them. And as for all these skinks and Saurus warriors that are coming up to disrupt my guns, we can simply throw down a summon to prevent their advance. It will just be a few skinks that manage to slip through. And we'll have our scurvy dogs here to deal with that in just a moment. We just need to slip them into our back lines once again. And then they can start hunting down some skinks. This Slon Mage Priest is in a little bit of a precarious position too. He is pretty open to getting sniped out by Luther, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll throw down the Power Siphon to make sure that he can't burning head my handguns. And now all guns turning onto him. The snipe attempt will begin with many buffs coming in from Luther. And hopefully we'll be able to kill him off, since if we do, the lizardmen forces will be reduced to just really their infantry. And their infantry, they aren't especially proficient at keeping it together after their lord dies. You'll see that many of the skinks will just get routed off. And that's basically all we need. Now, the Slon Mage Priest will be able to escape, by the looks of it. At least able to escape the likes of Luther. But I think our scurvy dogs can probably handle that situation. As for the scurvy dogs, by the way, we definitely want to be keeping them alive as long as possible, because they are extremely proficient at getting these guys to rout. While Sirens and Luther actually focus on bringing in the terror. That's going to be the general strategy now that the Slon is dead. Simply have to rout off as many troops as we can. Then we should be good to go. Our caster getting a little bit caught up here. We're going to bring Luther in to support her. And as for these skinks, I think our scurvy dogs should be able to rout them off. So there we go. Things going about as expected. Luther helping our caster out of there. We routed off these skinks. We are out of guns, but the lizardmen don't have too many things that we actually need to be shooting here. So that's not really too much of a problem. And I'm feeling fairly confident that we'll be able to win out the game here. Some more skinks over here at very low leadership. The mere presence of Luther should be enough to get them off the battlefield. And we even have a few handguns left. We're going to pull them back behind our zombies just so that they can get a few shots onto the pterodon riders that are coming in onto me. And as soon as those guys get routed off, it's just this remaining lizardmen infantry blob. To deal with them, we use our zombies to muck them up in the front line. Luther will charge them in the back. That gives a -10 leadership debuff. And that should be enough to actually rout them. A breath attack too will likely do good, so let's actually position Luther to go ahead and do that. And some stamina, vigor debuffs onto these troops can't hurt either. We'll go ahead and do that. Our caster will retreat into a little bit of a safer position, since we want her to be able to nahek these Sirens or possibly even Luther. That is, it's fairly important, and if I healed up my caster, it would be a little bit of a waste, since even though she is a decent fighter, she, it would be much better used on my Sirens, because they are ethereal, and that makes healing about 4 times as efficient on them. So, yeah, that's going to be the plan. At this point, it's really just closing out the game, and we're going to really be seeing the advantage of the scurvy dogs here. They've chased off all the chameleons. They've killed off Saurus warriors, and many other troops too. And they'll be very good against this cohort of Sotek also. They'll be just cycle charging in and out of them. Since they are unarmored, they are pretty easy to actually take out. We've established enough of a lead now, actually pushing the Lizardmen into army losses, that we can just close out the game with the final summon and a tap out from Kulharman. Well played. He nearly pulled through, but the snipe out on the Slann was pretty rough against him, and our Sirens were at full HP the whole battle. So even though it did come down to a few troops of ours, we still had a pretty nice gold advantage. Specifically, the scurvy dogs being alive in the late game was brutal. Look at that, 1,000 damage value on a single dog unit. More than some of my cavalry, I gotta say. So GG. So here we go. Our second game against Kulharman is going to be up against a rush with many Glade Guard. So the goal, I think, is gonna be we're gonna move our Rangers and Bugmans along this flank. That way they can pick off the targets and they won't be getting too overwhelmed. Our Gyro Bomber will be able to assist too. And Drycha is moving in, but the Gyro Bomber is actually quite proficient against her. It's really nice against single entities, and we can fairly easily dodge these Glade Guard Starfire shafts. So that shall be the goal. We'll be trying our best not to lose the Gyro Bomber like we did last time to these volleys of Glade Guard. And to do that, essentially all you have to do is keep it moving. But it does stagger fairly easily. And you can see... Oh my gosh, come on, Gyro Bomber, what are you doing? There we go. I wasn't worried in the slightest. So, Gyro Bombers do actually stagger to single shots pretty hard. And that makes things real rough for them, I gotta say. And now the frontline engagement is going down. We should be able to win this infantry fight over here, just with our Rangers. Our miners with blasting charges can move up to get as much damage as they can before they get focus fired down. And for all these Wildwood Rangers, can move in with our Rangers and snipe them out. Going to be the plan. Our blasting charges are doing fairly well, and if we can win this frontline fight, that would be very good. Our Slayers will want to start chasing away these Glade Guard as soon as possible. So as soon as these Wildwood Rangers are dealt with, our Slayers are going to start moving into the back line. Pendulum does go down on my infantry, which is real rough. But Dwarven infantry is quite hardy. They should be able to hold. As for the Gyro Bomber, it's back, and it'll be able to do well against all this Wood Elf infantry. So we're going to move it there so that it can begin dropping bombs. And hopefully that goes fairly well. As for the Slayers, they are finally able to start chasing off Glade Guard. And the infantry fight's actually going fairly well for us. Gyro Bombers coming in. A summon coming in from Drycha is actually going to be a little bit scary. But we may still be able to handle that fairly well. Just one problem though is that we do have many of these War Dancers now encroaching onto my troops. Nevertheless, we are able to chase off these Glade Guard. We do have our Slayers at the ready. They're taking a lot of damage from them, but I think that trade goes fairly well for us. As for these Wildwood Rangers, we can throw down some bombs to rout them off, but we've lost off many of our Rangers now, and that's actually pretty bad. Perhaps I should have spent more time actually setting up a defense for the Rangers, since it seems like the loss of them is actually going to be the end of my main DPS here. The Wood Elves really just overwhelming my forces on that front. And it looks like it will likely be it. I think that was a misplay. Our Slayers could have intercepted these guys, and then the Rangers could have done a lot of damage. Of course, the Gyro Bomber too sort of wasn't really there to assist soon enough, and Drycha caused a lot of havoc. Let's see. You know what? I think there's too many Glade Guard really to win it here. Our Slayers have taken too much damage. I will call GG here. GG! Oh no, rough situation for the Dwarves. I think I did misplay that. We did do really well sniping out some of the initial troops, but the Glade Guard really got too many shots in the early game. I don't know what would have been the best way to prevent that. And as for the Gyro Bomber, I don't think... I did misplay with it. And I wonder if we could have done better. I think I'll still keep trying it out. I just have to be really careful with it, because it can get focused down really well. So here we go. It's a rematch against Call Harmon. We have a Dwarf build up against the Wood Elves. We have a bunch of Rangers over here in the back. And it's going to be a cavalry rush coming on in. We have our Slayers to defend against that. The Wild Riders will be taking a lot of initial damage from the Gyro Bomber and the Quarrelers. The Slayers can move in to also kill off a few Wild Riders. They're generally trading quite well, but more Wild Riders are coming in. Actually, some great Stag Knights could be a little bit of a threat. But our Bugmans do have charge defense against large, and a little bit of focus fire should be able to deal with that situation. Now, our Slayers are going to be dealing with cavalry here, so we can afford to pull back our Dwarf Warriors. They'll be able to reposition to block for all of our range units. The Gyro Bomber is now going to move in over on top of these Stag Knights and hopefully get a decent bombing run going here. See, actually pretty decent damage by the looks of it. Nothing amazing, but decent. Should be able to take out most of the things there. Drycha has revealed herself, but there's not much we can really do to prevent her from moving in at the moment. The Sylvan Knights are fairly beat up at the very least, so we'll be able to take them out. And we're going to do that with the Gyro Bomber and some focus fire. As for the Slayers, they'll be able to chase off the Deepwood Scouts, and we'll even use our Miners to do that too. Sylvan Knights have converged onto our Bugmans, and a second bombing run of the Gyro Bomber should be able to take out a lot of this cavalry. There we go, getting in some pretty nice damage, and now it's just going to start focus firing. Just trying its best, hopefully routing off a few troops. It does do quite a bit to cavalry, but since they are Sylvan Knights, they don't have too many models, and the bombs will be slightly less effective than I would have hoped, but nevertheless, I think we should have enough to actually win the battle here. The Sylvan Knights are gone. I think nearly gone. There's only 12 of them left. There's no healing, and they should be fairly easy to finish off. As for this unit of Wild Riders, we are able to chase them off with the Gyro Bomber, and our infantry is doing fairly well too. Our Slayers are very healthy, and even though there are some units of Deepwood Scouts, we can finish them off with our with basically anything here. They don't have very high AP values, so they're not especially threatening. In the meantime, the lack of anti-air, this is basically the best case scenario for the Gyro Bomber. It's free to use up all of its ammunition, and it can also chase off units fairly well. So that shall be the plan, just continuing to fire away. And now that Belgar is freed up, he's going to be charging in onto Drycha. Our blasting charges aren't extremely proficient here, but they're still better than nothing, and we'll be using them onto some of these Dryads, and maybe even some cavalry if they do get in range. which it looks like will be the case in just a moment with some Sylvan Knights coming in. We'll slow them down with our Gyro Bomber just to try and get a few more extra shots off with our Quarrelers. And it won't be a huge difference, but it still works out fairly well. In the back line, we have finished off all of the Deepwood Scouts here. And it looks like that's going to be it. Pretty nice win. It seems like in a rush situation with only cavalry, it does pretty well, but I think that build was more experimental for Carl Harmon. The mass cavalry doesn't do especially well without support, sadly enough. If you look at the Gyro Bomber, it did pay for itself for the first time ever. So at the very least, it's good in that situation. Only just though, but an extra 50% value on it is still quite good. It's slow too, helped out our Quarrelers, but it's not really the biggest playmaker here. That instead was mostly my Slayers, who were able to catch Wild Riders. Our Dwarf Warriors were able to hold the line, and basically all we needed. So nice. It's gonna be a Dwarf versus Norska game now with a heavy focus on clearing out the infantry quickly as we can. We have some Thunderers to push back any skirmish play, and we're going to be routing off these Marauders as quickly as possible, using our blasting charges and the Gyro Bomber to do the job. A Manticore summon will be going down, and the boat too that we'll have to dodge with the blasting charges, but it looks like they take the brunt of that force. Nevertheless, we do manage to rout off the front line, and the Gyro Bomber can take out these Berserkers now. As for Wulfric, we have our we have our Slayers that will be diving in. The Berserkers have taken a ton of damage on the approach, and Wulfric should be getting pretty low too. These Wolves diving in onto my Slayers, and we'll be trading effectively against them, but it's not the absolute worst case scenario, since the Slayers, they want to be getting into the melee anyways. As for Wulfric, he's having a bit of a hard time. He's taking a lot of damage from Grombrindle. We'll be reducing his leadership and giving all of our troops Unbreakable to really secure, hopefully, a kill on top of Wulfric. As for our Slayers, these Ice Wolves are a little bit of a problem, so we'll expend 2 bombs here to try and take them out. Nice micro play, actually pulling the Ice Wolves away into a safer position. Means that we won't be able to launch bombs on top of them, sadly. But nevertheless, we're still doing quite good. The Manticore does take into the air, though. We'll have to retreat with the Bomber. At the very least, however, we'll be able to distract the Manticore, and it even gets rampaged due to the Thunderers. Some of the Berserkers, too, trying to avoid some bombs by pulling in closer to my infantry, but a second bombing run should be able to rout them off. Trolls are now off the battlefield. We've established a fairly nice lead here. I think a Burning Head is actually going down, but just a Pendulum instead, and we are able to actually dodge that fairly effectively. So that's gone pretty well. These Berserkers, or the throwing axes in the distance too, will be shut down by our Longbeards moving in towards them. And we can see now the infantry front for Norska has really started collapsing. Manticore is now off the field, going to go for the Fimir Caster now. And then Wulfric will snipe him out late game with our Bomber. There are a few Berserkers left that will be able to get a little bit of damage here, and a few throwing axes alive too. But I don't think they have nearly enough ammunition to handle the rest of our forces. Some more Norscan Ice Wolves are coming in, charging into my Miners. They'll trade fairly effectively there, but it looks like the Miners are actually holding out surprisingly well against the Wolves. I guess these are just the ROR normal Wolves, so they don't have a ton of AP, and the Miners will do fairly well there. And there we go. It's going to be a GG from Carl Harmon. A nice, aggressive Dwarf build to close out our practice today. Wulfric is now gone, and that's going to be army losses. Pretty good. I think the extra ability that I took on Grombrindle wasn't really needed. But that's completely fine. As for the gyro bomber, look at that. It pays for itself as long as you can get your bombs off. So I think that was definitely worth it. The Thunderers did really well too, since they were extremely well defended. And that's basically it. Our blasting charges were really effective in that fight. Killed off all the berserkers, and then there was nothing really to stop our troops from killing everything else.